ones of some larvae. And in addition, all of the ones that you will see are species that can be found in Albemarle. So if you're local, then these are things that are outside your door, and should be hopefully we'll see some of them this spring, summer, or fall. All right, let's see. Okay. So we'll start with that first question, which is what really is the difference between a damselfly and a dragonfly? And this is where I'm going to ask you to pause for a minute and really look at the photos, because I think it's really important that you learn to observe. Like if you're going to learn about dragonflies, observing those kinds of differences, seeing what you can see is really important. So if anybody has anything that they see that is either the same or different that they want to note, feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll go over some things. But okay, so okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, thanks for chiming in. Yes. So somebody has a comment about the eye placement, and the way that the wings are sitting. Okay, and this is a good thing. Somebody else is noticing about the wings being different positions. These are great observations. This is exactly the kind of thing we want to be looking at. Okay, so things that are the same. Well, we know that they're both insects. They both have heads, thorax, abdomens. They have 3 pairs of legs each and 2 sets of wings. So what makes them different? Those are the major things that make them similar. And both of these comments have mentioned wings, which is really the key, one of the key things here. You'll see that the damselfly is listed as a suborder Zygoptera, and that means yoked wings. Okay, and the yoked wings are they're very similar. So if you look here, you can see that the shape of the wings, there are 4 wings, they're all folded up here, and they have really the same shape, all 4 wings. Whereas the dragonfly here is in the suborder Anisoptera, which means unlike wings. So if you look at the front wings, the 4 wings here versus the back wings, we'll see that this one is sort of more oval in shape, but this one is really have a small attachment here, and then it kind of just is not attached here, and then kind of is broader and differently shaped than the first one. So that is a key thing. How they're holding their wings, I think people have noticed that they're in different positions. Damselflies often hold theirs closed when they are perched, not always, but most of the time. Dragonflies, on the other hand, almost always have theirs spread wide like this. So that's great. Great. Thanks. Somebody else says their bodies are different. Yes. You can notice some things here that the dragonflies tend to be a little bit plumper. The damselflies are a little bit more slender looking. And also the eyes. Somebody noticed the eye placement. The eyes are really large. These are the eyes of the dragonfly here, and they're very large, and it's not uncommon for them to touch here. Whereas the damselflies are spread a little bit wider, and they're a little bit smaller and spread apart. So, okay, so we're gonna keep coming back to some of the same themes, but we'll move on. All right, so here's your first chance to test yourself. Is this a dragonfly or a damselfly? All right, we just learned the difference. So if anybody wants to chime in, if you've got a thought, excellent. I like it. Okay, I'm seeing votes for dragonfly, and that's exactly right. Okay, this one, it's very clear how we can see the differences between the front wings and the back wings. Remember, they have unlike wings, and we can see how it's just attached here, and then it comes way down, and it's sort of more squared off and a very different shape than the front wing. Okay, so that's one of our keys there, along with those eyes, which are larger and kind of almost touching here in the middle. So this widow skimmer is a type of dragonfly, and it has a unique pattern on its wings. Okay, all right, this one's a little bit trickier, but given what you know, what do you think of this one? It's called a swamp spreadwing. So, okay, I've got one vote so far. Anybody else want to chime in? You got an idea, or you can just test yourself. This one's, yep, okay. I've got couple votes for damselfly. Thank you. Yes, this one is a damselfly. And the thing that you got to remember, as I said, most of the time they have their wings folded together when they're landing. When they're perched, but this is a swamp spread wing. You can guess from the name spread wing that this is one of the few kinds of damselflies that actually keeps its wings spread when it is perched. The key things we're looking at is that slender body, the eyes, which are far apart and smaller, and the wings, which are the same shapes, right? And attached to there together. So, okay, great. So now I want to talk a little bit about sort of just the different parts of the dragonfly and what their function is, and get us familiar with the sort of the anatomy a little bit. Here we have a picture of a common green darner, close up of its eyes and head here. And as you might imagine, primary functions here are, we're talking about feeding, right? The mouth parts are sort of on below this part here on the front, and seeing. So dragonflies have amazing sight. They have compound eyes, and when you're looking at a very large dragonfly like this one, it can be up to 30,000 simple eyes. Okay, so if you have a great screen here, you might even see that there's just lots of, this is a reflection of the sun, but there's lots and lots and lots of little dots here. It has this sort of texture to it. Those are the 30,000 simple eyes. They're great at detecting movement. They're almost a 360-degree view because of the way that the eyes are sort of wrapping around here. And they can also detect color and UV light. So so this makes them great predators and great, really helps them when they're doing all their acrobatic flying to know where they're going. So the damselflies, on the other hand, they also have their eyes made up of simple eyes, but obviously they're considerably smaller and less. And as we can see here from this front view, their eyes are really spread pretty far apart. So we've got, one eye here and one eye over here. They don't meet at all. It's thought that perhaps this helps enhance some depth perception for them. And also, one thing that I find that's fun is sometimes when you see one perched, it'll be perched on like a stem, like a piece of grass or something like that, or a woody stem. And actually its eyes are the only thing you might see looking at you peering around a stem, because the stem will like sort of hide its body when it's perched like this, and you just see the eyes. So it's pretty fun. All right, let's talk about the thorax now. This is where we talk about like locomotion and movement. That's the focus of the thorax. It contains the flight muscles, the wings, and the legs. So it's 3 parts that are fused together, and each part has a set of legs. So there's 3 sets of legs, 3 parts of the thorax. The first part's here, the second part's here, and the second part has a pair of wings. And whoopsie, how did I do that? Sorry. and the third part also has a pair of wings. So 3 parts, all with legs, and another one with wings. The pattern on the thorax is something that we'll talk about. Those patterns vary wildly. You'll see a lot of different examples. This one is called a dragon hunter, and these 2 sets of wide dark brown stripes with a small yellow stripe here and here are some of the key characteristics for for the dragon hunter. Okay. So those wings, as you may know from having observed them yourself, they're amazing flyers. So they can fly forward, they can fly backwards, they can go, some of them, the strong flyers, can go about 100 body lengths a second. That's approximately 30 miles an hour. They are speedy little critters. They can fly backwards, they can hover, and I like this to use this photo because the other thing that's really important to note is it's not like birds that have their wings out that are sort of parallel to the ground and just thinking of flapping, right? That's not exactly what's going on here. Each of these wings moves independently and can rotate. Okay, and so you can see here in this photo that these are not parallel to the ground. They've been rotated. This one's been hovering, which is why I could get a photo. It's not going full speed, 30 miles an hour or what. So this is Blue Dasher, favorite of mine. I really like them. But so it's really interesting, and scientists and people who are interested in flight and people in the military often are interested in studying the flight of dragonflies, just because it is so unique, the way that they fly, and they're such great flyers. One of the things I often do when I'm trying to take photos of dragonflies is, I have to track them because I have to be able to see them fly and hopefully see them land somewhere where I can take their photo. And I challenge you this spring to go out and try to track a dragonfly with your eyes. It is really quite a challenge, and you'll get a good laugh because you'll be going like this, trying to. People often wonder what I'm doing, and okay. Another thing about their flying, which is really interesting, a lot of people don't realize, is that there are species which are migrating as well. There's several different species, including the common green darner, which is the one we saw the big eyes of. The black saddlebags, wandering, and spot-winged gliders. This one here is a wandering glider. The wandering gliders are fantastic. They're so interesting. There's evidence that they migrate from as far from India to East Africa, an estimated 4,400 miles. DNA studies have been done from different dragonflies, different wandering gliders across the world. And those indicate that there is enough genetic mixing across the globe that this is a global species. Like, it is a species that's everywhere. So that's like really super fascinating, I think. And I think there's a lot more to discover about how these dragonflies move around, yeah, but it's pretty fascinating. So that's a very special species. All right, let's talk a little bit more. We talked about, here's an azure bluet. It's a kind of damselfly. We can remind ourselves that it's got that slender body, and it's got its wings folded, and they look the same shape here. So we've talked about the head and eyes. We've talked about the thorax. So let's talk about the abdomen now. The abdomen houses digestion and reproduction parts for the dragonfly or damselfly. I will occasionally, it is commonplace even amongst people who are the top scientists, to sometimes use the word dragonfly to refer to dragonflies or damselflies. That's fairly commonplace. Otherwise, you wind up saying odes or odonata or something like that. So if you're confused, please just make sure that that might come out. I might call it a dragonfly, but I'll try not to. Okay, so the abdomen consists of, starting after the thorax ends here, it consists of 10 segments that I've kind of labeled here, so you can kind of see, like, segment 3 is here, segment 4 goes from here to here, segment 5, etc., all the way to segment 10 here. The pattern of stripes and spots on the abdomen is also very useful for identification. The damselflies here have a couple of things that you could look at. One is these stripes here. There's a median stripe a light stripe that's called the anti-humoral stripe and a dark stripe called the humoral stripe. And the size and the way that those are positioned can be helpful as well. This one, the azure bluet, one of the main things that it makes it distinguish is all the amount of blue here, this solid blue on S10, S9, S8, and a lot of S7. So that's one of the key features for identifying this particular one. I also said it's for reproduction, so let's talk a little bit about that. At the end here are what are called cerci. Both males and female have cerci as their terminal appendages. The males tend to have, those tend to be bigger, and in addition, the males have, and in the case of this damselfly, they're very small, but they have lower appendages here, and those are used to grasp the female during mating. The males also, you will notice if you look at S2 here, there's a little bit of a bulge underneath S2, and this is some secondary genitalia. So that is one of the ways that you can tell a male from a female. The female's bodies tend to be, especially in the dragonflies, a little bit wider and stouter, and we'll see some examples of that as well. So here are some mating orange bluets. Okay, and so this is the wheel position, and this is the typical way that you will see dragonflies and damselflies mating. So the orange one here is the male, and you can see that his abdomen comes down. He's clasping the female with those terminal appendages behind her head there. And then the female brings her abdomen up to S2, where we just talked about that there's a secondary genitalia for the males, and that is how they mate. And so you'll see them like this, and you'll even some of the dragonflies and stuff sometimes assume this position and will fly together in this position. So it's kind of neat. And at times, not this pair so much, but at times a lot of people say that you can see them making a heart. So here's a pair of flying in tandem. These are autumn meadowhawks. Given the name, you guess that you might see these in the fall. Again, the male is in the lead. He's clasping the female on her head. And sometimes they will do this and then fly to a place to perch and mate. But sometimes after they've mated, they stay in tandem, and the male is sort of protecting the female and actually protecting the eggs that she is going to lay. And she will just drop down and tap the end of her abdomen on the water to lay eggs directly into the water. So you can even see some the eggs and sort of some water here on her abdomen here. So sometimes males will stay in tandem. Sometimes they will release the female, but they might hover over the female, and they're trying to make sure that no other suitor comes along, and another male comes along and tries to mate with her until she is, done laying the eggs. So that's what you're seeing when you're seeing them flying in tandem like that. Here's a pair of damselflies. The interesting thing about damselflies and certain of our dragonflies, including the darners, which are those large ones, and we saw a swamp darner and the common green darner, they will deposit their eggs directly into vegetation or rotting wood. And so here again, the blue one that's poised up there is the male, and the female is got her abdomen bent so that she can go ahead and deposit eggs into the vegetation there. So these are familiar bluets. All right. Has anybody got any questions so far? We're doing okay? Yeah? Okay. All right. All right. So now the eggs, they've been laid in the water or into this plant material, and it takes them a few days to a month maybe to hatch. Okay. And at that point, they're small larvae that are living in the water. And I think a lot of people might not realize that the majority of a dragonfly's life is spent in this larval stage. They average 12 different instars. So that means they are growing and shedding their exoskeleton like 12 times on average as they're getting bigger and closer to becoming an adult. They could live several months to several years as a larva, okay? Whereas in the adult phase, which is what we're used to thinking about when they have their wings and can fly, that can last from weeks to months, okay? So this is how they overwinter. They can live in the water. Sometimes I've heard as long as 7 years. That can depend on climate and food availability and things like that. If it's colder, there's not a lot of food, they're not going to mature as quickly. So there are predators. They use a lower lip called the labium that really just kind of like darts out very quickly to extend and grab prey. So they're pretty strong predators in the lakes and rivers and streams where they live. So, okay. So what happens when now we say, okay, they've gone through their instars and they are ready to become this adult? And so this is called that they're emerging. And so what they do is the larvae that we saw, will climb out. Oh, I see a question. What do the larvae eat? Yes. So they could eat beetles, bugs, small tadpoles, like just basically anything that they can get their, any other little water creatures that they can get their mouths on, even each other, right? That's also possible. So, but yes, just any other little bugs that they can find in the water. So, mosquito eggs. That is a good question. I think of them more as they would eat the mosquito larvae, I would think. I don't know about eggs. I think of them as mostly preying on like other living, creatures that are like moving around and things like that, rather than nibbling on eggs. But that is a good question. But definitely these are your friends if you have mosquitoes, both as larvae, they can eat mosquito larvae, and as adults, they can fly around and catch mosquitoes in the air. So they are definitely friends. Okay, so back to the emergence. So they crawl out of the water onto a stem, branch, maybe a rock, and they start to split open here in the back, and the head emerges first. And after a bit, as the head has emerged enough, it suddenly swings up so fast that I didn't catch a photo of it, but swings up, grabs on with its legs to what is now called the exuvia. This is what is left, the shell of the dragonfly. So it grabs onto that and pulls the rest of its abdomen out. And then, as you can see, the wings, which were so tiny we didn't even hardly see them right here, start expanding, and they're pumping fluid through there to expand the wings. This is a very vulnerable time for the dragonfly. It can't fly. It can't really go anywhere. So yeah, super vulnerable right now as it waits for some of its body to sort of harden up and for the wings to expand. And just to give you an idea, these 3 photos were taken, the first and the last one were taken 30 minutes apart. And it was not ready to fly yet. Unfortunately, I had to leave. So I didn't get to see, but it was really, really fun to sit there and observe it for that long. Okay, here's a couple more. These are shadow darners, and they're exuvia. And so you can see like sort of there's exuvia here, here, here. There's a whole bunch. There were a whole bunch that were emerging at a similar time here. Yeah, so it's a special thing to see. But they're not done maturing once they come out. You could see that they tend to be kind of pale, and this is called, the stage is called that they're a teneral adult. They're usually pale. They don't have their normal coloration yet. It can take days or weeks for that to come about. During this time, they often might leave the vicinity of the water where they were born. They might spend time in fields where there's lots of bugs and things to eat, and vegetation to hide in, and their cuticle hardens and the color pattern gets established. Um, uh, so, oh wow, that's very cool. Somebody's saying that a friend got dragonfly larvae and raised them in a pool of water on her deck so that they could eat mosquito larvae. Is that available to us? I have no idea. I've not heard of anybody handing out dragonfly larvae. I'm sorry that I don't know, but it's worth a look, and it's interesting to know. Okay, so on the left, we have the common sand dragon tenorel. You can see how pale it is. On the right, the common sand dragon with its adult full coloration. Sometimes, even after they're not tenorel, there's an immature stage. So they're not quite still a mature adult. This one is an example of a really striking difference. On the left, we have the lily pad forktail immature female, and as you can see, she's got lots of orange coloration. She's really beautiful. And then as she matures, she takes on the coloration on the right there, with this sort of powdery blue look. The eyes turn more green and blue. Looks like a different species, frankly, but it's not. It's not. And so that's kind of a fascinating one to have seen. The immatures can look this in this case very, very different. Okay, here's another one where I'm going to ask you to take a chance to observe. So we'll talk about the male and the female here. This is the common whitetail. This is a dragonfly, which really lives up to its name. It is very common, and it flies a good portion of the year. So this is one that you are very likely to see. Up on the top, we have the male. And if you're looking, you will notice that its tail here, its abdomen really, is fairly white, right? It's sort of this bluish white. And so you can understand that where it gets its name from. If you look at the wings, okay, the wings are important to look for different patterns and things on the wings. And you'll notice that the male has these wide bands here. Okay, but interestingly enough, the female, which is below here, looks pretty significantly different. And like a lot of animals, birds and other things, this is not unexpected that they might look different. So, but even things like the wing patterning, right? You can see that in the female, the tips are dark, and then in the center, and then near the base here, whereas the tips are clear on the male. So it is very different kind of look. Her abdomen is brown with these sort of diagonal whitish patches on it. So that's the male and that's the female. Then what do we have on the right is the question. What things do you notice about it that might give you some clue as to what you're looking at there? And if anybody has thoughts on that. Okay. So somebody is noticing, a couple of people have put in that they suspect that it might be an immature male, and you guys are exactly right on. So you caught on, we were talking about immature ones. Yes. So it's got the male wing pattern. So that's a good clue. You're probably not going to, switch wing patterns. Coloration, much more likely that might change over time. It can even change with age. The patterning here looks very similar to the female, right? The abdomen does, okay? But the wing pattern is the male's. What happens is this coloration here is actually, it's called pruneosity. It's really sort of like a filmy thing that covers as it ages. And so it develops that as it ages. And so this one will indeed look like it has a white tail. Other things that you could look for are things like, might be hard on your screen, but the cerci there, they're pretty long here at the terminal appendages, whereas females are very hard to see because they're so small and short. So that's another thing that we might have clued into. Great. All right, so we've talked about a little bit about how they're effective predators. They most definitely are. They eat flies, mosquitoes we talked about, leaf hoppers, beetles, but they can also sometimes eat larger insects like butterflies and other odes. Although this damselfly is probably not taking down a large butterfly. But so this is an eastern forktail with its prey. Again, it's a damsel. We see the way the wings are folded and everything like that. So this one, yeah, has a little bug. Here's an eastern pond hawk dragonfly, which is in the process of eating a stream bluet damselfly. So unfortunately for this pair, this is the female here, and the male was here grasping her behind the head, but he has lost his head and thorax already to our predator here, the pond hawk. So that was kind of an unusual moment, and for me. But you will see some dragonflies taking down other dragonflies. It's not just dragonflies taking down smaller damselflies. So what are the predators for the dragonflies? I mean, they are great flyers. They're going to get away from things. Well, spiders, obviously, they can catch them in the web. That's a possibility. There's spiders that live on like the lily pads that might take the lily pad forktails out without having to do this. And here's an interesting series that I wanted to share with you because I found it to be so interesting. So I was focused in on taking a picture of this lovely spread wing here, and then suddenly there was a flurry. So I'm going to go quickly through the photos and then we'll come back. Ready? And suddenly it was gone. And I thought, what just happened? I mean, I was just like, click, click, click. You know, this was a matter of a second or two. I'm like, what just happened? So I had to go back to my photos before I fully understood. And hopefully with the photo up there, you might be able to see what I hadn't noticed. Yep. So right down here, there's a jumping spider. And it was looking at the damselfly as well. Both of us were very focused on this damselfly. It thought that looked like a tasty meal, I guess. So if we go slowly through, you'll see that it is attacking. It's right back here. It's attacking, and the damselfly is twisting and trying to like get away from this attacking spider. And in fact, the damselfly did fly off. The spider is now hiding on the opposite side of the stem here. So again, just a really neat moment to sort of be able to see. So yeah, there. Birds. We've got a catbird here with one that looks fairly pale, might be a teneral or newly emerged dragonfly that would be easy to, you know, snap up and have a tasty snack. They can also fall prey to robber flies, to frogs, to fish. Sometimes if you're at a pond, you might even see like a fish jump out of the water and catch a dragonfly that's was flying low over the water. So they can be caught, but they are pretty adept flyers, as we've talked about, and also, you know, are just good at sort of being a little bit camouflaged when you when they go into the vegetation and things and sit there. It's can be challenging to find them. So the last thing we're going to talk about is just a little bit more about ID. Are we doing okay? Anybody have any further questions? Again, oh wait, we did get another question. Yes, do both dragonflies and damselflies live in warmer climate areas? So the species that you will see vary by the climate you're in. So like there will be different species up north in Minnesota, some species that live there that don't live where we are. but both damselflies and dragonflies do live across many different habitats and climates. So, do the odonata larvae live in or under the water surface? Yeah, so they're living in the water. They are not like swimming around on the top of the water. They're usually like down in the bottom, often in the muck. So if you want to see them, I don't know if anybody does like this the RCIA, like the benefit monitoring and stuff, but you know what we do if we want to look for larvae, and Jim and I do that some as a way of documenting what is there. We have these D-ring nets where it has like a hard bar, and you scoop up into the like the muck and the leaves and stuff usually, and can look for them in there. So yeah, they're usually down under the water, not on the top. And they do have gills. I see somebody is asking about that. Yes, they do have gills. The dragonfly's gills are sort of more internal. I'm sorry, I failed to talk about that earlier. And the damselfly had 3 things protruding from its tail end, if you will, and those are external gills. So yes, they have gills. Let's see. Oh, could that female damsel have gotten away? I asked myself that same question while the male was being eaten. I don't know. I did not see her get away. I didn't stay to see her get eaten either. But you know, I just don't know if the male was going to be able to like release if she was going to be able to really have that abdomen released from grasping her, since it was still clearly attached, even though his head and thorax had already been eaten. So I suspected that she was probably not going to be able to survive, even if she didn't get eaten, just because she had this attached to her, the abdomen. But I don't actually know what happened there. Oh, swarms of dragonflies. Yeah, no, that's super cool. That's super cool to be seeing them. And yes, sometimes it is migrations, ones coming through and stuff, but often sometimes it's just feeding swarms when they get there's a lot of other insects there for them to eat, but it is sometimes a migratory thing as well. So great questions. Okay. All right, we'll get back to the presentation and go through the elements of ID. So we've talked a little bit about the fact that we've got we're looking at the anatomy. So what is the sex, the coloration and patterning on things like the face, the eyes, the thorax, the abdomen, and the wings. And then we'll touch on size, behavior, habitat, and flight date. And move on along here. Okay. All right. So here we have a blue dasher, a male up top and a female below. By this point, you're a pro and you know that these are both dragonflies. And we can see that the male has on S2 here a little protrusion, also has some long cerci here, whereas the female is a little bit wider and stouter throughout her abdomen and tiny cerci right there. Barely noticeable. They both have the same kind of similar pattern on their thorax. You'll notice that their eyes are this nice green, and that the female, it's obvious that there's some red here. And this is not uncommon for the dragonflies to have sort of, they'll describe it as red over green, so that they might have 2 eye colors that you can see. They have white faces here. You can see that on the male without any markings, and that's one of the things that helps you identify it as a blue dasher. Similar to the common whitetail, you'll notice that the blue dasher has sort of a white tail. It's sort of that pale bluish white color, but in this case, it also has black at the end on the last couple segments here. So that is also something to look for. So there's lots of different details to look at. Sometimes you can tell. These are ones you can tell in the field. Most of the ones I'm showing you are ones that if you know the right markings, you'll be able to tell them in the field, and you can learn these markings from books or and things like that. But also sometimes there's species that are so similar that you really need to look closely at the size and shape of those terminal appendages or some part of their subgenital plate on the females, or, you know, measuring the length of one segment relative to another one. So sometimes the only way you're going to find out what species you have is by capturing it, looking at it in hand, or needing to look at it under a microscope to really nail down what it is. So but the vast majority of the ones that we've seen today and that you'll see out there, you can probably at least narrow it down, if not ID it, just based on the things that you can see in the field. Okay, so here's a stream cruiser. Again, we've got ourselves a dragonfly here. I'll just point out a couple of things. Yes, how many species in Albemarle? We have 112 recorded in Albemarle, which is a great number. That includes both damselflies and dragonflies. So the stream cruiser here, you can see that there's this one stripe on its thorax. That, along with these pale cerci, are something that really help with identifying the stream cruiser. So those are some of the things you might notice. Doesn't really have much patterning on the wings and stuff like that. Here's another one. This is called a spangled skimmer. I like these, they're very pretty. And there's a part we haven't talked about yet on the wing called the stigma here. And the stigma on the spangled skimmer is pretty white. And damselflies and dragonflies alike can have stigma of different colors. So that's kind of a fun thing to look for. The fact that this one is white helps distinguish it from a yellow-sided skimmer, a very similar looking. This one's female, so again, you can see very small cerci kind of poking out here, not very wide. But the females of these two species look quite similar, but the yellow-sided has more yellowish stigmas, and also these veins you can see here, they look dark, right? They look kind of black throughout the wings. But on the yellow-sided skimmer, some of those ones on this forewing here are actually yellow. So there can be differences in that kind of detail too that can help you identify things. So you can even identify some things by the wing, because they do have different patterns. Like there's different things like this little triangle here, or things where they say like, oh, this looks kind of like in the shape of a boot here. Areas like that you can actually, people have made a study of the wings of the dragonflies, and you can sometimes ID them by that if necessary. All right, let's move on to size real quick. Just a sort of a forewarning, if you're like me and you love to take photographs, that's great. And it's great to be able to look at all the details of the creatures when you get home and really pore over them and pore over your books and figure out what you've got. The one thing that you won't have is an idea of how big they are. So always good to kind of make a mental estimate of size, because these are, they vary wildly and you can't really pick that up in your photo. So just to give you an idea, this fragile forktail here is between 0.8 and 1.1 inches typically. Okay, so it's a damselfly, it's very slight, it's very small. If you're looking at these, just this exclamation point, this broken stripe here, the long stripe with a dot there, that is like your key thing for recognizing a fragile forktail. So if you're looking into that. So some of the ones we just looked at, this dragonfly, the spangled skimmer, was 1.6 to 1.8 inches roughly, so considerably bigger. The Stream cruiser here, 2.2 to 2.4 inches. Some of the darners can be, 3.5 inches or more. So like they do vary a lot in size. And so keep that in mind if you're taking photos and you want to ID things. Okay, last couple things. Is there a function of the stigma? I do not know of any function of the stigma. That's interesting, but I have not. Interesting question. I really have not heard of there being a function. I will say that like it does really stand out. I don't know, those white ones when those spangled skimmers are flying are very obvious. You can see this Halloween pennant here also has colorful stigmas. They're kind of almost reddish here on the wings, and so they do stand out. Might attract attention. I don't know if that's something like that the other dragonflies would clue into or not. But that would be my best guess. I don't really know. Okay, this one I just wanted to say about the importance of observing things like how they look when they land, or if they land. This one is perched, and you can see that its abdomen is held fairly parallel to the ground. So that is a clue here. This one, there's a bunch of dragonflies that tend to do this. They tend to perch, then they will fly off, catch a tasty insect, and often return to the perch, the same one or a nearby one. These are great for photographing because you have the you have this nice chance to see them multiple times because they're often coming back to the same perch. Sometimes, especially damselflies, they might sort of do what's called gleaning, where they like actually just grab little bugs off of the leaves of the plants that they're near, as opposed to like flying off and catching something midair like some of these dragonflies do. There are other dragonflies which tend to never seem to land. Super frustrating if you're trying to get a good look at them, super frustrating if you want to photograph them. This one hovered long enough for me to photograph it while it was flying, but they are most often seen what's called hawking, which means they're flying back and forth, either over a stretch of stream or river, or sometimes over a path. But you'll just see. And so again, you have the advantage of knowing that they're probably going to come back, depends on how long a stretch of that they're going over. But if you're patient, they'll often turn around and come back because they're going back and forth and they're catching insects in flight. When they land, the darners like this one, the shadow darner, and other darners, and many of these kind of flyers tend to perch vertically, which means that they're hanging sort of perpendicular to the ground as opposed to having their abdomen parallel to the ground. So all of those things are valuable pieces of information if you're trying to get an idea on something. Where is it perched? If it's flying, how high? Some of them like to fly kind of on knee height. Some of them more at head height. Some of them might be flying 30 feet up in the air. And all of these things can be useful. So, okay. Thank you, Zach. Zach says that he looked up about the stigma and it looks like it might be heavier and helps with gliding and reducing vibrations. I did not know that fact. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So, and okay, yes, and I see a couple more questions about photography. Let me just finish off this last couple things and I'll talk about those again because I have some references at the end for you. Okay, habitat and flight date. So just a reminder that yes, they're associated with water, right? We know that now, but whether they live in a lake, a river, a small stream, in a forest, a wide, shallow, sandy bottom stream, or a rocky stream, these are all different types of habitats. A seep, a bog, like you will find different dragonflies associated with these different types of habitats. And so like the lily pad forktail that we saw, it lives its life on the lily pads. Like that's where you're going to find it hanging out where there are lily pads. So some of them are super specific. Other ones are much more generalist, but it is true that like you might see things on the Ravenna River and different things on the James. And so there is a real need to visit a lot of different types of habitats, as many different places as you can, to see the different types of dragonflies and damselflies that we've seen. And also I'll just mention that one of the things we keep track of are flight dates, and this is also something that can help you with identifying things, meaning when is the earliest and latest that I see this adult out there in the world flying around. Okay. There are some that you'll only see in the early spring. Okay. So Donna had asked earlier, were there ones that are flying now? There could be. I haven't seen any yet. I haven't looked super hard yet this year. I think the earliest that we've seen anything was March 17th, and this is, decades of records at this point. So, April, really May, June, July, excellent times to be looking for dragonflies and damselflies. A lot of them come out, but like I said, there'll be some that we've only seen pretty much in April to early May, and then you don't see them again for the rest of the year. Other ones that are only going to come out in the fall, like the shadow darner is a fall species. It comes out in the fall. And other ones, like especially some of our small damselflies and stuff that you could maybe see from March through, even October, or November. And not to say that that's that same individual, right? It is likely different emergences of those those species that are allowing you to see them for such an extended time. Those damselflies are not going to live that long. But so that is an important key for you as well, if you're out there looking and wanting to know what you've seen. So, okay. So, now I'm going to answer a couple of the questions, and then if there are more questions, people can feel free to put more questions in the chat, or to, if you want to unmute yourself or what. Here's some resources. One of the questions was about photographic field guide. So I like Dragonflies and Damselflies of the East by Dennis Paulson. This is the book. It's got photos. I mean, they're not super big, right? It's not like looking at that's on the screen, but they are helpful. And I think that it strikes a nice balance between being able to look at the photos. It really goes into depth about what other things look similar, which is always very helpful in my opinion. And just gives you range maps and the whole deal. So this is a pretty good book to have. Damselflies of the Northeast by Ed Lamb. This is this book. The binding doesn't stay together very well, but he has really nice drawings. It's not photographic, but really nice drawings. This is a very useful book, even though it's from the Northeast. It is very still useful and relevant for our area. There's lots of other things out there. Some people, an older book is like Sid Dunkel's Dragonflies Through Binoculars. But the other thing you can do is you can go to Odonata Central. This is a citizen science site for documenting odes, and you can put your photos up there. If you want help with identification, other people will vet what you've put up there and help make sure you get a correct ID if you have a good photo. So, and you're also then contributing to the knowledge of flight dates, what species are in what counties. It keeps track of, county records throughout the United States and other places, I believe, in the Americas. Dragonfly Society of the Americas is a good place if you get really into it. There are annual meetings. I've been to a few pre-COVID, hoping to get back out there again. That we just started up again last year, but
hey Emily,
conflicts, but those have been great. I've gone to bogs in Minnesota and down into Texas, and really fun to go out with a bunch of people who are super knowledgeable about dragonflies, and have some fun discovering new things.
Emily?
So it is of the Americas. It is South and North America. So it does include those. So that's kind of interesting.
This
Let's
this is
see. So that's
Karen.
what I have to say about
Oh,
field guides. Oh, thank you, John. I'm glad you like the photos. I use a Canon. I think most of the photos probably were taken when I had a 60D, but I also have a 5D Mark IV. I use macro lenses primarily when I'm looking like 100mm, when I'm looking at all those small damselflies. They're really, really tiny, like I said, about an inch maybe. So you got to get really close to get good detail on those. A lot of the other bigger dragonflies, I'm often using like a 70 to 200 lens with a one. I usually have a 1.4 extender on there. Um, but yeah, I mean, you can use lots of things. Got a new 100 to 400 that also is nice. I prefer things that I can handhold because these guys are moving around a lot. I don't, if you get those ones that are perching and coming back to the same perch, I suppose you could set up your tripod and really do that. But almost all of my photos of these are handheld and mostly uh mostly manual focus, also just because I find that a lot of times it's just going to focus on the wrong part. It's just so small and I want to be so specific to get the eyes in particular clear. So yeah, so that's I don't know if you have more questions about that. I'm happy to talk more about that. Let's see. I feel like we have some more messages. Do I focus stack? None of those have been focus stacked. I have played around with that a little bit, not a lot. I tend to, especially for the damselflies, and when you're in that macro mode and stuff and you're really close, it is really easy to get like the eyes in focus and then have things not in the right plane, and so that the abdomen gets out of focus. So I do spend a lot of time patients like just trying to get like just the right angle so that everything is in that same sort of plane and I can see the abdomen clearly. But yeah, none of those, all of those are just taken and without photo stacking. Um, let's see. The guide question is Karen's question. Okay, a small flyer size guide. Oh, using your photographs. Okay. Yes, you have the books. Got it. Taking them into yes. Okay, so taking them into the field is not very feasible. Yeah. So I haven't really tried using it yet. Because I can't promise. So I can't promise that it's gonna help a lot with ID. But Odonata Central I think, came out with a beta version, maybe of an app for your phone. So that might be something to look at, to consider. But yes, I am not aware of any lightweight way to do it other than using your phone as a resource if you have internet service. There are some good places. Greg Lasley has like really excellent photos. It doesn't have like all those kinds of tips and pointers, but he just has extensive set of photos which are really good and to look at, but it's not gonna walk you through any sort of tips or ID stuff. um I see. Okay, all right, thanks for that thought, Karen. Okay, yes. um so yeah, maybe that would be something to do. um uh Yes, you're welcome. Thanks. Do I post my photos online? I do not have Instagram. I'm I don't know. I haven't gotten into Instagram. I maybe should. Have a I have a what do I want to say? Uh yeah, I don't really have an online presence is really the answer to that. um I yeah, I don't keep anything really up to date online. So I probably should do that. That would probably be a good idea. Um, um, oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it would be fun to do an exhibit. I've done, not a lot. I do a lot of presentations like this. So let's see. I see. I'm going to mention too that if people are excited about getting out in the field where you could actually see the dragonflies up close and personal, Jim and I are scheduled, I believe it's June 15th at Ivy Creek. So pay attention to their calendar because we'll be leading a walk there when the dragonflies are flying. And so you can come on out and join us. We get permission from Ivy Creek to use our nets for educational purposes. We will catch some of the dragonflies and damselflies so you can get to see them up close and personal, and also bring your binoculars and have fun, just as we point out different ones that might be perched that you can look at. So all right, anybody have any other thoughts or questions? Wow. Okay. Thank you. Zach, do Odonata lose, whoops, so many thank yous, I'm losing your question. Okay, lose their gills in the adult phase and begin breathing with spiracles and trachea. Yeah, they do have spiracles on the side. You can of the adults, you can kind of see the little kind of hole. So yeah, they do have those. So, and I imagine that that transition happens during that emergence at some point. They got to start breathing differently. So, okay, let's see. Yeah, so I'm glad everybody was enjoying the presentation. Uh, do they have direct flight muscles? That is an interesting question. I do know that if it's too cold outside, you can see that they're not gonna fly. And sometimes if they are, sometimes I've seen ones that are cold, and I've seen that they actually sort of start pumping their wings to kind of just get those muscles warming up before they can actually take flight when it's cold. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but I do think that there is a connection between the muscles and the wings that they need to get warmed up. So sometimes on a cold and sort of dewy day, I've gotten some that are just sitting there. They're just not going anywhere. You can photograph them to your heart's content. Yeah, okay, let's see. Let's see. Can you say something about the ebony jewel wing? Yeah, okay. So it's surprisingly numerous and easy to find. Yeah, ebony jewel wings are beautiful. And let me let's see if I get let's see if I can find you I don't know if I have a photo of that one. Let's see. Oh dear. Am I gonna find the ebony jewel wing? I should be in a different mode. Sorry. Well, we've got lots more dragonflies here. I'm come prepared with many, many photos. Where's my ebony jewel wing? Let's see. Ah, there's the ebony jewel wing. Okay. Here's the ebony jewel wing. This is a really common one. And it has this like really special black wings and the male, and then this metallic green body and thorax and stuff. It's really pretty. They prefer to be around a lot of smaller creeks and rivers and things, so you can find them in those kinds of places, and they flit around. And the damselflies are a lot less strong of a flyer than the dragonflies, and so they kind of flit, and they're really quite fun. Yeah, and so that's kind of the habitat where you would find them. I will say that, this Shenandoah National Park project has been like needle in a haystack kind of project sometimes, where you go out for a whole day hiking around and on the rivers and looking for things, and some days you find nothing. But when the ebony jewel wings are out, this is also one that you can find fairly commonly in the parks. They seem to like those small wooded stream habitats and small rivers in the park quite a bit. So let's see. Okay, so recording, someone's posting that they use a app called Dragonfly ID. That's a good tip. I have not tried that myself, but I'm sure that there are things like that. I mean, there's so much going on now with AI and being able to just like show it a photo and pop up an ID, so it wouldn't surprise me. Um, Wow, Zach, you have really interesting detailed questions, and I am sorry to say that I have no idea about whether they have evolved to become troglobites. No, that sounds like an interesting question. If you find out, please let me know. Um, so, um, yeah, okay. Kim is asking if I think there's been a decrease in dragonflies in the past few years locally. I mean, the different species are more or less susceptible to pollution and things like that. And so if you know, participate in that stream monitoring and stuff where they, you know, look at all the macroinvertebrates and stuff. I mean, dragonflies and damselflies are something that they will identify, you know, that they're as much as they can, I think, is my understanding. And they do use the information there to kind of tell something about the health of the streams. In fact, there's another interesting project that involves a lot of national parks and other places where they're actually using dragonfly larvae to monitor for mercury levels that I heard about recently. And I know that you know, I know that New River Gorge National Park, I saw an article that they're participating in that. It sounds kind of interesting and also sort of a citizen science thing, but I was a little surprised that they're having people go digging in their streams and actually finding dragonfly larvae and like, I don't know, putting them on dry ice or something and shipping them off somewhere so that they can be examined for mercury levels. But yeah, so do I think personally that they've gone down in number recently? I mean, most of my dragonfly hunting has been in the park lately, and like I said, it is just because of the elevation and the lack of lakes, not really much still water, just a lot of different habitats. We have found 51 species, which is pretty good considering we don't have any big rivers like James. We don't have even big rivers like the Ravenna. We don't have much in the way of ponds, still water inside the park. So it has felt like a needle in the haystack kind of proposition to find them in the park sometimes. So my inclination is to say that I feel like I'm seeing less, but I don't think that that's necessarily true in Albemarle. But you know, they could be experiencing some decline or change based on, like I said, pollution or, you know, perhaps climate change will also affect them. But a lot of these species are pretty widespread. There's not a lot of them, like I haven't shown you things that are like sort of like endemic to our area or anything like that. So, but yeah, just in general, right? I mean, insects have been having more and more issues, and these are insects like everything else, susceptible to pesticides and all of that, unfortunately. Um, okay, let's see. Um, yeah, ebony jewel wings and Dalvet State Park a few years ago. Yeah, I believe it. They come out and they're really fun. So yeah, Zach is agreeing that the insects population have definitely been going down, and recommends a book to us about Silent Earth, about declining insect populations. So yeah, great. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. I think we've made it to 8:20, which is far later. I guess I took a lot of questions, but
Well,
uh,
thank you so much, Emily. This is a great presentation, and really, I think you win the prize for most turnout for a
oh, well,
presentation that we've had.
thanks. And thanks to everybody who came. I
Oh
appreciate
yeah,
the invitation to speak to you tonight.
and thanks everybody for joining in and being enthusiastic. So wow, I knew Emily was amazing, but now she's clearly even more amazing than I knew. So and thank you all, and stick around. We'll have for other programs we'll have coming up, and maybe we can all go to Ivy Creek and follow you guys around in June.
Yeah,
That'd
I
be
would
super.
enjoy seeing a lot of you there.
Okay, now that we have the grounding. So thank you very much, everybody. We're gonna call it a night, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Good night.
Good
Thank you,
night.
everybody.